her childhood friend. Once B realizes, she hugs him. Paul feels uneasy as he notices the two looking at each other. B defends her old friend, and Paul playfully teases her about it. She explains that Will was just a childhood summer friend. Later that day, as they're about to be close again, Paul notices bite marks on Bea's legs. B tries to cover it up, saying they're just mosquito bites, but Paul doesn't believe her and grows suspicious. He returns to the woods where he first found B. There, he discovers her nightgown, torn and stained with a sticky substance. He also spots a footprint the size of a man's, proving B wasn't alone that night. A sweet newlywed couple, B and Paul, are sharing in their wedding video how they first met. They later head to a cabin deep in the woods, where they plan to spend their honeymoon. The cabin belongs to Bea's family, and it's the place where she grew up. B tries to show Paul around, but he can't wait, and he starts getting close with her. The couple spends the night cuddling, telling each other how much they're in love. While they're asleep, a strange light from outside shines over their faces. The next morning, B tells Paul she isn't ready to have a baby yet, and Paul says it's fine since they still have plenty of time. They go boating at the lake, and when they're about to swim, B realizes the water is freezing, so they decide against it. Instead, they just shower together and share another intimate moment. Later, they have lunch at a nearby restaurant, but find only one man there. He looks upset, smashing a lamp before angrily telling them to leave. As they're walking out, the man suddenly recognizes B and calls out to her. He introduces himself as Will, her childhood friend. Once B realizes, she hugs him. Will apologizes for his behavior and explains that the restaurant belongs to his wife's family. Paul feels uneasy as he notices the two looking at each other. Will's wife, Annie, then comes out and tells them to go. Will roughly holds her arm to calm her down, then tells B and Paul that his wife isn't feeling well. That night, B comments that Annie doesn't seem normal. Paul replies that something is also off with Will, since he smashed a lamp and grabbed his wife's arm harshly. B defends her old friend, and Paul playfully teases her about it. She explains that Will was just a childhood summer friend. While they sleep, the cabin lights begin flickering, and Paul's alarm rings. He had planned to go fishing in the morning, but when he steps out, it's still dark. Checking the time, he sees it's only 3:45, so he figures his alarm must be broken for going off so early. Paul heads back to bed, but notices B is gone. He searches the cabin but doesn't find her, so he looks outside. In the middle of the woods, he finds B without clothes. When he touches her, she suddenly screams. Paul carries her inside and asks what happened. B insists nothing happened and says she's fine. Though Paul grows anxious, she tells him she must have been sleepwalking and reassures him that she's alright. The next morning, Paul sees B preparing breakfast, but she seems off. She burns the bread and forgets to even batter it. Paul suggests they see a doctor, but B keeps insisting she's okay. She then tells him she made coffee, but when Paul checks, it's not made properly either. Later that day, as they're about to be close again, Paul notices bite marks on Bea's legs. B tries to cover it up, saying they're just mosquito bites, but Paul doesn't believe her and grows suspicious. He returns to the woods where he first found B. There, he discovers her nightgown, torn and stained with a sticky substance. He also spots a footprint the size of a man's, proving B wasn't alone that night. Paul goes back to the cabin and hides the nightgown. He doesn't say anything, but just watches his wife in the bathroom, where she seems to be practicing an excuse that she has a headache. That evening, he tries to be intimate with her, but B uses the same excuse, saying she has a headache. Paul asks if she's avoiding him, but B says he's being ridiculous. He asks again what really happened in the woods, and she repeats that she was just sleepwalking. When he tells her to wear her nightgown, B gets upset and says she can't because it's already in the laundry. Knowing she's lying, Paul chooses not to push her further. At bedtime, Paul struggles to sleep. A while later, the strange light shines through their room again, and Paul gets up to check it. He grabs his gun, and outside he sees a shadow passing by. He chases it into the woods, but when he finds nothing, he fires a warning shot that wakes B up. Paul finally brings up the truth about the nightgown, asking if she met with Will that night. B angrily denies it, and the two end up arguing. The next morning, B writes in her diary, putting down that her name is B, and her husband is Paul. When Paul tries to peek at it, she quickly shuts it. Later, he asks again about the bite marks on her legs. B says they're healing, but Paul says they actually look worse and don't seem like bug bites at all. While on the boat, Paul tells her he wants them to leave because nothing feels right there. B says she doesn't want to argue anymore and only wants to enjoy their honeymoon. They begin to get close, but Paul suddenly feels wet and sees blood on his fingers from B. B claims it's just her period, but Paul says it's too much blood and something isn't normal. Tired of everything, Paul decides to confront Will. He goes to the restaurant and finds Annie. She behaves strangely and says something almost identical to Bea's diary, introducing herself as Annie and saying her husband is Will. Paul also notices the same bite marks on her legs, just like Bea's. Annie warns him to leave, saying they're not safe and that they will hurt him. Paul later finds Will's bloodied hat floating in the water. Seeing the back door of the restaurant open, he enters since no one responds. Inside, he turns on the computer and checks the security footage from the night he saw B in the woods. On the screen, a strange light appears near the restaurant, and Annie is seen following it. Suddenly, the lights flicker, and on the wall Paul finds Annie's written notes, the same as Bea's diary. They're even smeared with the same sticky substance that he found on Bea's nightgown. Frightened, Paul hurries out, not noticing a shadow figure watching from the window. When he returns, he checks Bea's diary and confirms it matches Annie's notes exactly. Paul asks who she really is, but B recites her name and details word for word, as if memorized. Growing more doubtful, Paul questions why her writing is the same as Annie's, why she has the same bite marks, and why both of them followed the light in the woods at the same time. He says maybe Annie harmed Will, because he saw blood on his hat, and he fears B might do the same. But B insists she's only trying to protect him. Paul can't find the car keys, and moments later, B locks herself in the bathroom. He forces the door open and discovers her hurting herself with a knife. Despite his desperate questions, B never reveals the truth. He tells B that he loves her, and when he asks what she would say back, she answers, "We don't remember what to say." He begs her to explain what's happening, but she tries to run, so Paul is forced to tie her to the bed. After a while, B asks for his help to take something out, guiding his hand toward her body. Paul pulls it out and sees a worm-like creature. B then begins to confess what happened that night in the woods. She says she followed the light but only saw shadows of whatever they were. She admits that they entered her and left something inside. Through a kind of shared mind, she now knows what they know. B says in a few days, they will take what's left of her. She wanted to tell Paul, but she wasn't allowed, so instead, she tried to spend her remaining days with him during their honeymoon. Paul insists they must leave, but he can't find the car keys. B tells him they can't leave and suggests they just watch their wedding video together instead. As Paul is about to walk out, the strange light appears again. Under its control, B says they don't need him anymore, and that his time is up. When the light fades, B comes back to herself and warns Paul that the strangers are planning to get rid of him, so she needs to hide him. Suddenly, she knocks him unconscious. The next morning, Paul wakes up in a boat, his hands tied. B tells him that to protect him, she must hide him under the water where they can't find him. She drops the anchor, which is tied to him, and as Paul pleads that he won't be able to breathe, B pushes him overboard. That night, B sits watching their wedding video. Her body is failing, her skin already peeling away. Soon, the beam of light returns, and B steps outside where Annie is waiting. The two women walk into the woods, where the shadows of the strangers are there to welcome them.